is Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. And we're going to do a couple
Do-do-do.
minutes. Do-do-do.
Do-do-do. Do-do-do.
Do-do-do. Do-do-do. We're going to do non-spoilers for a couple minutes and then transition into full spoilers. We will warn you. Time codes are also in the description. But Dead Reckoning Part 1 is the 7th film in the Mission Impossible series and the 3rd film directed by Christopher McQuarrie and written by Christopher McQuarrie and co-written by Eric Jenderson. Or this one is co-written by him. And it stars Tom Cruise, Haley Atwell, Simon Pegg, Ving Rhames, Rebecca Ferguson, Vanessa Kirby, Isa Morales, Pom Klementieff, and many, many more people. And once again, we follow Ethan Hunt and his team as they face off against some very dangerous adversaries and perform death-defying stunts in a globe-trotting adventure. Niles, what are your initial thoughts on Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1?
I would say it lives up to the franchise name. And before we dive in too far, I will say, I think that you, Dylan, you have a stronger appreciation for these films than I do.
I'm a super fan.
Yeah, you love Mission Impossible, and I'm like, this is fun. I like them. But I'm not like, I could watch like a Mission Impossible movie and then I don't need to see it for like another 5 years. I've seen it and I'm like, okay, I never really need to go back and touch that again. They're fun though. And I do enjoy the films. Like whenever I watch them, they're fun. And I think this one really does live up to it. I think it's an apt film for us to be discussing this week, given the strike and AI and everything. We'll get into that later. But, it's a really cool action, adventure, thriller. Like Tom Cruise knows how to do this and he does it well. And I mean, of course, the director and the writer, they did a great job of like putting together this film too. It feels very similar to previous iterations in the franchise. I really liked the antagonist here, and I know the antagonist usually isn't like super revolutionary.
Yeah, there are a couple good ones and a couple very forgettable ones. Like
exactly,
Philip Seymour Hoffman in 3 is really good. I think Solomon Lane from 5 and 6 is really good, and Henry Cavill is great. But like the villains of one is a different animal entirely. I think the villains of that are fun, but 2 and 4 I don't think have very memorable villains.
Yeah, I don't even remember them.
Yeah, 4's villain, I forget he's in the movie. I remember so much about 4, but the villain, like when he turns up, I'm like, oh yeah, it's a guy.
Oh yeah, there's an antagonist in this movie. That's funny. So I think that they did a much better job with the antagonist in this movie, Gabriel, which we'll get into later too. But Mission Impossible to me, I feel like is escapism in a lot of ways. It is just like letting yourself get just enthralled in this story of these people doing these absurd stunts and maneuvers, these just absurd action sequences. And so I think this film lives up to that standard of escapism. Like there wasn't like a single moment I think in the film where I was like, okay, I'm bored, or like, okay, that's a set piece, or like it really takes me out of the film, or I'm like, oh, did I leave the oven on at home kind of moments, so it's like the movie moves quickly, which I really like too. And what I like about this movie too is that I think it assumed that the audience is smart enough to keep up too. And I think that's pretty consistent with some of the previous films too, but like it's just like it goes and goes and goes, and like the team kind of teams up, but we don't need to introduce every character. It's like, okay, we just need an establishing shot and then you go. And they kept doing those kinds of things where it's just like a quick shot. You can understand the subtext of what happens in between scenes. Like they know that the audience is keeping up pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I do appreciate that, and I also appreciate that even though this is the 7th film in the series and the last several have become more and more lore, like had more lore and recurring characters, I do think every Mission movie is pretty accessible on its own. Like, you could watch this as your first Mission Impossible, and I don't think you'd be confused. You might not pick up on the dynamics between some of the characters who have been around for a long time, but like you can watch this and enjoy it, whereas in several other long-running franchises, probably not going to fly. And I do want to say, and I don't always like knocking other films, but I don't have that much love for the Fast and the Furious franchise. And
Yeah.
I would say on a superficial level, these are very similar franchises. But I
Yes.
think the Mission movies just work on a level those don't for me. And I think part of it is just Cruise and co are willing to get beat up and like look like they're down and out sometimes. Whereas remember it was leaked that like Vin Diesel and The Rock all had in their contracts that they couldn't get hit more than they hit other people and stuff like that. And it's like
Oh yeah.
I feel like Mission is what Fast and Furious wants to be. And I think the Mission Impossible series is great. I think this film is great. I wouldn't say it's the best one,
Sure.
but I'd place it on the upper tier of them. And I think it's a testament to the quality of this franchise across the board that I've seen countless different rankings over the last couple weeks of all the films, and everyone has like a different number one. And I can agree with the arguments for any of them. You know, they
Yeah.
all
Right.
and I do love too, before McQuarrie sort of became the de facto director of the back half of this series, every movie had a different director and they all brought their own style and flair to it. And I remember reading a long time ago, McQuarrie, even though he was carrying over from 5 to 6 and now 7, he wanted that to be maintained. So he's been doing different styles each time. And if you watch Rogue Nation and then watch Fallout, they feel very different. They look different and the vibe is different. And I would say the same is very much true here. One, it's the first film in the series shot on digital, which is interesting. But two, the editing and the framing is so distinct from the rest of the series, I thought. And
I would agree. Yeah, I don't have a very good visual recollection of how the other films looked, except for the third one, because I would say that was my favorite one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought the way everything was like framed and everything was very interesting in this film too, and it's nice to like because we see it in IMAX or was that
We did. Well,
okay.
yeah, we did. I don't think the film was filmed in IMAX, but we did see it in the IMAX theater, which was loads of fun.
Yeah, it's a great
but
screen.
yes. But the one thing I thought about the framing specifically that was really interesting, and I'm sure this has been done in films before, but this in terms of like action movies that I see, there were a lot of shots where the subject of the shot was on like one side of the frame and looking out of the frame the same side that they were on. And usually in a conversation scene, you'll have like Ethan will be on the left of the frame looking across to the right, and then Luther would be in his shot on the right looking left, and that's kind of how conversation shot reverse shot works a lot. And it's nice for continuity, but this was the opposite of that. And a lot of the dialogue scenes were them looking out of frame from the side of the frame they're looking out on. And it felt very claustrophobic, and it played into the paranoia aspect of this movie that I thought was really interesting. And they're against this unseen enemy, which I think added to this a lot. And the movie breaks the 180-degree rule at one point, which, do you know what that is? Or I can explain it for the
please explain. Yeah.
Okay, so when you're on set, and if you're having a conversation scene between two people, you basically would draw a line through the middle of them, like in the middle of their face, right? And then you would not want your camera to cross that line. So basically, in a shot reverse shot, I would always be on the left side of the frame, you would always be on the right side of the frame. But early on in the movie, there's a jump cut where Kittredge is on the left side of the frame, and the next shot is of him too, but he's on the right side of the frame. And
they did that multiple times. They
Yeah.
did that with Luther at one point, like midway through the film where they're talking together. But yeah, I noticed that too. That's very interesting.
Yeah. And like in a lesser filmmaker's hands, you might be like, oh, they fucked up. But I think McQuarrie has earned our trust at this point in terms of filmmaking. It's like they're doing this for a reason. The film is meant to keep you on your toes a lot. The characters are on the back foot. They're dealing with something different. And the editing really plays into that, I think. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit.
Yes.
But yeah, let's see.
Well, in
you got
terms
a
of
couple
like
notes here too.
the shots and everything too, like there's a lot of cool shots in this film. I think I really enjoyed that opening sequence with the Russian sub.
Oh
It
yeah.
kind of does like a whole, because when you had that in your note about the 180-degree thing, it just made me think of that scene because it just like flips very slowly,
Yeah.
because like
Mhm.
it's all underwater. You can't tell which way's up, and then it turns very slowly, and then it reveals the sub. And I thought that was
Mhm.
really cool. And then they did that later in the film, so like I just appreciated those kinds of shots. And there was a
Yes.
lot of unique looking compositions
Mhm.
in this film.
Yeah, I agree. I really appreciated and I am still not like the best and most knowledgeable about what different framings mean and stuff like that, but I think part of doing what we do is trying to get better at it and thinking about it and
Yes,
analyzing a little bit. So we're learning, we're getting there.
learning. Look
um
at us go.
but I will say I loved this movie. I think it's one of my favorite missions. And I love the whole series and
Yeah,
Cruise and his cruise. Oh my god, that was not intentional.
good job.
Their
The
commitment,
cruise crew.
yeah, their commitment to the filmmaking craft is on full display once again, and it is a rarity in the industry at this point. The
Yes.
tactical nature of these films, the dedication, it's next level. Do you have any
Yeah,
final
it's really good.
thoughts before we go into spoilers?
I mean, as always, I love the recurring motifs in
Mhm.
this series. Like the lifelike facial masks come back, which is really cool. I've always
Yeah.
loved those. The self-destructing little mission instructions, the chase sequences through these touristy areas, which aren't
Mhm.
really just Mission Impossible, but I feel like that's always in a Mission Impossible movie or through this
Yeah.
kind of
Long runs,
yeah,
long
these
shots of
yeah,
Tom Cruise
Tom
running.
Cruise just doing his long run down the hallway. You got to have one of those. And there's plenty of that in this film. I guess before we move on to spoilers and
Mhm.
more in-depth discussion, what's your favorite Mission Impossible movie, Don?
I think Fallout, the one before this. Fallout is the one that just lands on such another level for me. I love the Halo jump sequence.
Oh
I
yes, that's so cool.
And the ending in Kashmir, the helicopter chase is great. And fun fact about that, they filmed it outside of Queenstown, New Zealand, and I was there when they were
Yeah.
filming it. I did not see
Wow.
them, nor did I see them filming it, sadly, but I was there. Tom Cruise's private jet was parked at the airport when we landed. And the entire time we were
Cool.
there, I'm like, I hope I see someone from this movie. I did not.
Nice. Well, that's good
But
to know. Yeah, I mean, I
yeah,
like that one as
but and
well.
you said 3 was your favorite, right? The J.J. Abrams
Yeah,
one? Okay.
I liked 3. That was a really fun one, and yeah, we'll get into it more. But yeah, I think it is kind of how the movie was shot too. I remember it having a very distinct look.
Mhm.
I just remember a lot of yellow.
It's
Kind
very
of that's
yellow. It's
it's a very
very
yellow
yellow and
film.
very sweaty.
Yeah, and I liked that about it. I just liked that the aesthetic of it, and just Philip Seymour Hoffman as the villain
Mhm.
was incredible. Like he
Yeah.
was such a great villain, and we'll get into that later. But any other thoughts before we move in?
No, I mean, like, I feel like if you are someone who enjoys the Mission Impossible franchise, you've already seen this, and if
Yes.
you're not, maybe you should check out Mission Impossible. I remember when we were kids, it had a reputation for being, like, dumb or something, but I think it's just because everybody was, like, super hyped up on Jason Bourne.
Yeah, I think so. People were, yeah, you got the kind of more realistic chase sequences and action, and then you got
Mhm.
Mission Impossible, which is outlandish and over the top.
Yeah. But I will say, just for the franchise in general, this is a film series that is 7 films deep and has been going on for 26 years. And
Jesus.
every one of the movies is good. That's crazy.
Yeah, they're pretty solid through and through, and yeah, it is because of the cruise crew.
Mm-hmm.
They
All
just
right.
stick with it.
Yeah,
But
but
yeah,
let's get
let's
going
get
into
into the
spoilers.
discussion where it's more spoiler territory.